Hi, these are the top 10 films of 1970. When I say top 10, I mean my personal favourite films of 1970. Cheers. In at number 10, Performance. Warner Brothers thought they were getting the Rolling Stones version of A Hard Day's Night, but instead of a bunch of giggling, childish singers running around,
oh, that this too solid flesh would melt.
they got a violent sexual acid trip. I would have loved to have been there for the first screening.
There's nothing wrong with me.
James Fox, who usually plays posh, is surprisingly perfect as a Cockney gangster who is on the run from his former colleagues. The first third of the film is just a sort of violent gangster drama, but once he dyes his hair and hides out at Mick Jagger's rock star house, the film becomes a psychedelic trip dealing with identity. The crime stuff is really well done and really exciting. The acid trippy stuff sometimes gets a little boring. It's a bit like watching a couple of people on acid and you're not taking it yourself. But this is a really cool film. And of course the music is great. Nicholas Roeg was the co-director, so this is sort of his feature film debut. He was in charge of the visuals. So the film is great to look at and amazingly inventive. Roeg being one of the greatest British directors of all time. In at number 9, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Another great director makes his debut. This time, Giallo master Dario Argento. The story is quite simple. Run-of-the-mill, we need to find the serial killer before they strike again. But it's Argento's style that stands out. It's nasty. The cinematography is fantastic. Vittorio Storaro, one of the great cinematographers, shoots the horror with such class, and Ennio Morricone delivers another terrific score. In the film, lots of women are brutally murdered, but it also seemed to kill the career of Eva Renzi. She plays the grinning, mad murderer at the end, and she herself said,
"Do you want me to show you?" Of course, it's easy to play. I couldn't kill a fly. Nobody give me any kind of interesting part after that. So it was meant to kill my career in a certain way.
But still, a great film, and a really good example of what Dario Argento was going to bring to cinema. In at number 8, Little Big Man. This revisionist western is all over the place, but in a really good way. It keeps switching from broad comedy to tragedy. Dustin Hoffman plays this Little Big Man, a 112-year-old who tells his life story, how he was raised by Indians and went from place to place meeting famous figures in the West and getting up to all sorts of antics. The film looks amazing and has a great and very funny supporting cast. Faye Dunaway, Richard Mulligan, Martin Balsam, and Chief Dan George all give standout performances. Where the film is most effective, though, is its showing of massacres of Native American tribes. They are hard scenes to watch, but so important considering how these victims had been portrayed as villains in westerns for decades. It was also an attack on the war in Vietnam that was raging at the time, showing the US Army as a violent attacking force that massacres natives in their own countries. It's an odd film, but the focus on the struggle of the Native Americans means that this is just too important to ignore. But if I was listening to an old man that looked like Dustin Hoffman who was going, "I was there at the Battle of the Bulge and I met Wild Bill Hickok and I was there when Kennedy was shot," I just wouldn't believe him. In at number 7, MASH, a comedy about army doctors during the Korean War who get through the days and the horror by fucking about and messing around, is as odd as it sounds. It's a really funny film and has some fantastic comedic performances from Donald Sutherland, Elliot Gould, Sally Kellerman and Robert Duvall. Maybe too much of the film focuses on the doctors sexually harassing women at the camp. That hasn't aged so well. But aside from that, it has a very unique feeling to it and deals with how messing about and not taking things seriously is something that happens when people are under great stress. How humour is a way to deal with life when horrors surround you. God knows we need some humour this year. In at number 6, The Conformist. Bertolucci's film is a marvel to look at. It's breathtakingly beautiful. Vittorio Storaro is once again the cinematographer. This is a film so beautiful that you could watch it on mute. Jean-Louis Trintignant plays a fascinating character, a fascist who doesn't seem to actually hold any political beliefs. He just wants to fit in. There are so few lead characters in fiction who are this unsure or cowardly. This is not about a man who's in charge of his life. It's great to see that often people do terrible things just to get along with others and not stand up for what's right. It's a fascinating and gorgeous movie. In at number 5, Wanda. This is another brilliant character study. Barbara Loden writes, directs and stars in this independent movie about a passive woman who wanders around with no sense of purpose, moving from person to person with no connection to anything. It's hypnotic to watch her walk around and not really give a damn about anything. It's a remarkable performance. Eventually Wanda ends up with a bank robber, brilliantly played by Michael Higgins. He is violent and unpredictable, and again totally believable. We follow them cross-country, but there is no romance in their relationship, or indeed their crimes. These are lost people. Loden was clearly a huge talent, a terrific actress, and this was the only feature film she directed. But wow, what a film! It's a tragedy we didn't get any more films from her. She died 10 years later, and we can only wonder what she would have achieved if she'd been given the chance to make more films. She said that she based the character of Wanda on herself, but she was anything but passive. She wrote this and shot it with a crew of 4 people on a budget of $100,000. A great film by a great filmmaker. In number 4, Woodstock. This very long documentary about the music festival of the same name that had taken place the year before in 1969 is a really fun watch. Woodstock was such a success. A time for love, coming together and getting really fucked up. There was a real sense of hope in the world, along with some great music. It's a brilliant documentary as we go through everything from the building of the sets, the bands, the many high people, and even a man cleaning the porta potties, which is literally my favourite scene in the film.
Glad to do it for these kids. My son's here too, and I got one over in Vietnam too.
There's great little details like an announcement saying, "The acid is not poison, it's just bad acid," and all these details really make it feel like you're there. The editing is outstanding. There were many editors, notable among them Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker. Watching the film brings a smile to my face, and I just really wish that I'd been there. In at number 3, Gimme Shelter. Well, I'm glad I wasn't there for that one. Following the Rolling Stones on their 1969 tour and ending at the Altamont Free Concert, which took place only 4 months after Woodstock and did not go nearly as well. In fact, it went terribly. 4 people died, one of whom was murdered, and many people were injured, and multiple cars were stolen. Maybe having the Hells Angels as security wasn't a good idea. The tragedy of the event makes it a more interesting film than Woodstock, especially when we got Mick Jagger watching the footage of a man being stabbed right by him as he sings on stage. It's a brilliant documentary about great music and things going wrong. It's a good double bill with Woodstock. We even see some familiar faces, including concert promoter Michael Lang. Gimme Shelter was made by the same team that made Salesman the year before. Director brothers Albert and David Maysles and their editor Charlotte Zerwin, who they gave a director credit to. A thing I think should happen more regularly in documentaries. Editors have so much to do, with so much footage to go through, and have such an impact on them. Gimme Shelter is a car wreck with great music, and it doesn't ask or even answer any questions. It just shows what happened. It's bloody brilliant. In at number 2, Patton. Yet another brilliant character study, albeit this one with an epic background. George C. Scott's performance of George S. Patton is a tour de force. His anger, vanity, ingenuity, determination, he really is amazing. The battle scenes are thrilling and expertly done. It shows the scale of the war through these huge set pieces, but also by using lots of different locations. It's quite something. Francis Ford Coppola wrote the script, and you can see how this film would later go on to affect his own film, Apocalypse Now. There are helicopters everywhere in that film, and here it is planes that fly over in almost every scene. Robert Duvall's character in Apocalypse Now is also very reminiscent of Patton, a man who loves war and feels it's what he's built for. When Duvall says with sadness, "Someday this war's going to end," that sums up Patton as well. He's such a fascinating character. Someone who is a monster, but a monster you'd want on your side. George S. Patton died in a bizarre accident soon after the film is set, and it's great that the film doesn't show this. The film is about his drive and mad determination. if he showed his death, then it would just be about his life and not about what was at his core. Too often I think biographical films want to show us everything from the moment someone's born to the moment they die, and they often kind of feel a bit empty. A film needs to get to the heart of the person, and Patton does that in an epic fashion. And in at number 1, 5 Easy Pieces, and yet another astonishing character study. In Wonder we have someone without any ambition, drive or interest. In Patton we have a man driven by love of war and conquest. And here we have Bobby, a man running from responsibility. When we first meet him, he's working on an oil field. He likes to drink, play cards, go bowling, and spend time with his waitress girlfriend, who he seems to despise. We later find out that he is in fact a piano prodigy who ran away from his upper-class family and life. When he finds out that his father has had 2 strokes, he decides to return home, reluctantly taking along his girlfriend. The road trip and the family encounters are brilliant, totally realistic, but filled with such energy because of Nicholson's unpredictability. Nicholson gives a pitch-perfect performance. He's angry, fed up, bored, and vulnerable. Whether he is complaining about not being able to substitute food in a diner, or failing to beat up a nurse who was massaging his sister, he is brilliant. We see his character go through so much, but by the end he doesn't really change. He's incapable of it. The supporting cast is fantastic. Especially good is Karen Black as the waitress girlfriend. She's annoying but deeply sympathetic. A woman in love with a man who seems incapable of loving her back. It's so tragic. This film is full of life and character. A story about a man who chooses to be a failure. Fascinating and moving, 5 Easy Pieces is one of the great films of the 1970s. So, counting down the top 10. In at number 10, Performance. In at number 9, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. In at number 8, Little Big Man. In at number 7, MASH. In at number 6, The Conformist. In at number 5, Wonder. In at number 4, Woodstock. In at number 3, Gimme Shelter. In at number 2, Patton. And in at number 1, 5 Easy Pieces. The 70s was a great decade for film, and this first year is no exception. A lot of other good movies came out. What are your favourite films in 1970? Cheers.